Captain Picard. Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
My Readier Room.
Hello, and welcome to the Readier Room, not to be confused with Standard Orbit. Ours is the only Star Trek The Next Generation rewatch podcast with actual on-set insights and stories from those who are there to see the magic happen day in and day out. My name is Mitchell Mells. I was Chief Consultant of Services at Paramount back in the 1980s. And with me is my life partner, Brandon Hobbs, who is Head of Resources Management. Brandon, how are we doing today?
I am doing great, Mitch. And to open this episode out, I would really like to make a bit of a statement. We got a lot of mail. Most of it concerning my treatment of you last episode.
A bit controversial.
A little controversial, yes. I think I came off just a little bit harsh. And first of all, I'd like to offer my apologies.
Well, you know,
I do intend to do better.
We've talked off camera.
We have, yes.
And we're still here.
I would like to, extend to the audience my apologies, but also, my own story, which is that, in the same way that Mitch has his gambling addiction, I have my synthahol addiction. I have been struggling with a synthahol addiction for years.
I think it started on the set, right? Like during production?
Yes. Well, I mean, yeah, in season 2, when they introduce the bar, what's it called?
Point Forward.
Point Forward, that's right, yes. Most people don't know that was actually a bar.
Right, functioning.
That was a fully functional bar.
Fully stocked.
Where they did serve synthahol. And synthahol, while being a much safer alternative to alcohol, is not entirely safe. Fun fact.
It's
fun fact that most of the audience probably doesn't know.
No, it's what you see the actors drinking on set in various episodes. We always have to be very, very careful to either give them an opportunity to spit it out or to just not do that many takes at once in one day, because it really takes a toll on human biology.
Yeah, it is addictive, and I have sought help. I'm currently being helped for my synthahol addiction, but I just wanted to level the playing ground here, let the audience know that no one's really perfect. I'm not judging, and neither is Mitch.
Well, I think our audience knows how everyone has their own personal demons and evils to fight. In that, you're right, nobody is perfect, but this community has always been one to come together, rally behind somebody in their hour of need, support them when they need it, and just welcoming all types of individuals. Different evils that people face, whether they've had an alcohol addiction or drug abuse or spousal abuse, or they're some kind of MAP individual. The Star Trek community has always welcomed them, and I imagine it will continue to do so. And it's that community that keeps us coming back week after week to do the hard work, to tell the stories, to recap the episodes, and it's a community I wouldn't trade for the world. And if anybody out there listening has their own problems, please know that help is out there. Please know that support is out there. And if you want some support, you can always email your problems to thereadierroom@gmail.com. It's a capital T, capital R, and who knows, might even end up being featured on the show. Very much.
That's right.
Yeah, and very much like our fan Thad, who asks us this week's question of the week. So coming in from Thad, he's got a very, very great question. He says, how did LeVar see through his visor prop while on set? The actor who plays Geordi, if you're not in the know. And that is a very, very interesting question. It's a question that I've never heard anybody ask before. And
No.
Maybe LeVar might not either. It's just very, very insightful. But I'm sorry to say that the answer to that question might not live up to how deep of a question that it is. And the reason I say that is because LeVar, for the most part, could not see through that prop. He just couldn't. If you notice in the early seasons, especially season 1, most of LeVar's scenes, he's just like standing in place or sitting in a chair. He's not very active moving around. He's never in the away parties. He doesn't do any action. And that's because he couldn't really see anything. Every time he would walk around the set, he would just kind of bump into things, like his hip would hit a table or something. He would trip. He would run into the other actors. It was a mess.
Yes, that's right.
Right. But eventually, just by sheer force of will and reinforcement, he learned where things were on our sets, because our sets didn't change so much throughout the years. And eventually he became able to navigate like the engineering set, the bridge set, without needing to see very well at all. And at that point, Geordi really became a much more active character on the show because we could do more with him, right? Now, it might seem a bit cruel to LeVar to do this. Oh, put on what's essentially a blindfold, walk around, try to act that way. But you have to remember that LeVar's character was also blind, right? This was a type of method acting, and frankly, I think the results speak for themselves.
Yeah, really genius, honestly.
Yeah. So, Thad, great question. Anybody else? If you have any more questions, please send them in. We're very happy to answer them. But that takes us to today's episode. And on this episode of the Readier Room, we're going to be discussing Justice, which I believe is the 6th or the 7th episode? I'm not quite sure.
The 6th, right?
The 6th. Yeah.
I think.
Well, it's
pretty sure
it's always in flux because the first episode's like a two-parter, and
it's a two-parter. Yeah, it could be the 6th or the 7th.
Right.
Maybe even the 5th.
It's a real quantum episode.
Yeah.
Depending on how it's observed.
As every episode in the first season is.
Right. Exactly.
So Justice. I'd like to kind of kick this off just talking about the original concept of this episode. Okay. Because that's going to lead us right into what the episode actually became. Which in itself is pretty interesting. But the original pitch for the story was, I think, a good idea. Solid concept, right?
So what was
in the original pitch? The Enterprise has to navigate this culture that kind of the same as what we got. It's a culture that punishes all crime with death, right? The conflict actually in the original pitch was that a security officer from this planet killed an Enterprise officer,
right,
and then would also be sentenced to death. Actually, I think by their own spouse or lover or something.
Right.
Like their own spouse or lover had to execute them.
I remember this because it was cool in that finally we were going to bring like the concept of the red shirt into TNG. Like this.
That's right. Yeah.
This would be that was a big callback.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a callback, which sadly did not make it onto screen. But also interesting with the original concept was that there was going to be this kind of subplot of a rebel uprising on this same planet that was not cool with this kind of like rigid, system of law, right? So a lot of things going on in the original script. Now the thing is, when Gene read it, he was not happy. A lot of people don't know this, but this was actually the second treatment to have been submitted. The first being Encounter at Farpoint.
Right.
So logically, this would have been the second episode to be filmed. But Gene was so unhappy with the script, he nearly just tossed it completely.
Led to a lot of delays.
He said it wasn't sexy enough.
Oh, jeez.
So, Thorne, the writer for the episode, the teleplay writer for the episode, he was really scrambling to get these aliens into some kind of workable form that Gene would approve of, right? So his first attempt was just to make the aliens these human-like nudists, which we do see echoes of in the final product, but even like that was just not enough. So he added this subplot relationship with Riker and one of the alien women, which usually Gene's pretty keen on, but that was not enough. So the script went through like rewrite after rewrite until Gene just finally settled with a culture that spends all day having orgies and playing ball.
Yeah,
I'm not sure why he was so fixated on that bit.
That was one element that in Gene's vision survived all the way through the process. The playing ball
bit. Yeah. To this day, we still don't really know what playing ball is, because we are treated to a very lengthy scene of playing ball in the final episode, and even on set, we couldn't really discern what the rules were supposed to be to that game.
Yeah, I assume it's some kind of visual metaphor, some visual storytelling, in that playing ball is directly what leads to Wesley Crusher's downfall. But
right.
Connecting the dots on that one is best left to the individual, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you really can't downplay Gene's just genius here.
Right.
He's
always a few levels above everyone else, playing very far above the rim, Gene.
Yeah. So, far be it from us to really judge what this episode turned into. But all these changes really, they ended up removing a lot of the conflict of the actual episode, right? Because originally there was going to be that, that rebel faction and having to contend with all that stuff. So, basically we just ended up having to throw a god into it.
Yeah, which was the go-to solution in those days.
It was, yes.
So, I mean, the astute viewers at home who've been watching along at season 1 will note that this is one of several episodes so far that have had the Enterprise crew encountering some kind of god, right? And
yep.
For this was intentional. Part of the design Bible that Gene laid out was that threats to the Enterprise really had to be something that could not be solved with firepower. Gene viewed the Federation's fighting capabilities as being too far advanced for any normal alien species to contend with. So the Enterprise always had to go up against godlike beings or things they couldn't fire at, like rule of law. And this episode combines those two things. Eventually, I think in the latter half of season 1, maybe the beginning of season 2, we were finally able to convince Gene to kind of let this go, in that it's going to get so tiring to write in a new god every week for the Enterprise to just fight. And this is only episode 6 or 7, whatever we decided it was, and it was already just getting so rote.
Yeah, I mean, by this point we had 4 gods?
I think so. Can we name them all? So
we got Q.
We got Q. We got the wizard, prog rock keyboardist from the Ferengi episode.
Yes. We have the Traveler. And now we have this see-through spaceship in this one. Yeah.
Okay, there might be one more. I'm not sure.
I actually do think that's it. But all kind of follow the same trajectory of just the Enterprise crew being talked down to, and then the Enterprise crew reciting platitudes to resolve the situation.
And then the god just disappears.
Yes.
Back from whence he came.
Yeah. So let's get into the meat of this episode, huh?
Yeah, the episode itself, not its surrounding circumstances. So what happens in this episode is the Enterprise is tasked with, I think they're visiting a colony that the Federation planted on a planet. They knew.
So they're delivering colonists to a planet. And then on the way, I guess, back from that planet to wherever the hell they were going, they'd stumble upon this planet of blonde people.
Oh, see, I thought that the colonists they were delivering were being delivered to this planet.
No, and we can definitely start talking about that in terms of the Prime Directive.
Yeah, let's, because that's the most annoying point of this episode.
Yeah, so this is another logic-defying Prime Directive breaking episode where the Enterprise touches down on a planet that is pre-warp.
I don't even think they have space travel.
That's it. Yeah, like, you're not supposed to contact any planet that is pre-warp.
And they just do.
They just do.
Yeah.
Just not even talked about.
There's so much talk in this episode of like, oh, we have our own laws called the Prime Directive, and, we take them very seriously. And the very fact that they are putting together an away team, that alone violates the Prime Directive.
Right.
The Prime Directive is not about like, oh, don't mess with them seriously. It's don't mess with them at all. Don't interact with them at all. You see so many later episodes.
We see that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, I was just going to make the same exact point you did. We see that so much later on.
Yeah, they have like outposts so they can observe whatever planet it is without being seen by its inhabitants. They put on disguises so that they can integrate into society without alerting anybody that they're there.
Right. Right. But in this episode, they just touch down, and conveniently, the alien race on the planet is not at all interested in space travel. Right.
Well, I think even more conveniently, the alien race is just human beings.
yeah. There's a couple layers to this. So the episode opens up with Riker being very happy.
Yeah, because he went ahead of time.
He went ahead of time, yes. But why is he happy?
Why is he
happy?
Yeah.
Because I would like to draw attention to a series of quotes from the bridge crew. Geordi says something along the lines of they'll have sex at the drop of a hat. Remember that?
I do.
And then Yar responds, "Any hat." And I just like to know what any hat, the phrase "any hat."
Did she mean like a condom or an actual hat?
I don't know. I'm so confused by this line.
Yeah.
Any hat? That's kind of implied, isn't it?
There's
the drop of a hat.
There's a lot of that going on in early TNG writing, I think. Just tags to the end of certain lines that add virtually nothing and detract quite a bit.
Yeah.
Maybe Denise had a certain amount of lines she was contractually obligated to say every episode.
Yeah, maybe. But so, the Riker comes in all smiles because he just went to a planet where everyone has sex. And Riker loves sex.
It's very important that the viewer understands that.
Yeah, it definitely is. And if we didn't know before, we know now.
Right.
So they discover this planet by chance. They beam down. They had an initial party go down and make contact, and the episode starts with Riker basically beaming up with his party and being very happy about it. Picard sends another party down, including Wesley for some reason, who is a new acting ensign.
Well, can I interject right here? Because already we're at a point where things start to go slightly awry behind the scenes. So this away team that is the first one the audience sees goes to the planet was extremely contentious. Not among the producers or the writers or the director, but among the cast of all people. So when the concept of this episode was being pitched and like the cast was reading the scripts, they were doing their table read, I think it was Frakes who noted that this initial away team was made up of only and exclusively the attractive members of the bridge crew of the cast. Because in the first draft, it was Riker, Troy, Wesley Crusher, and Dr. Crusher were the only ones who went. And the idea was that these were the members of the crew who would fit in this picturesque society of attractive people. And, Frakes was kind of being a braggart about it. But as soon as that idea was floated, all of the cast, they all just got extremely either offended if they weren't in there or smug if they were. And the ones who were offended ended up, like, tracking down certain writers, like, oh, you got to rewrite this. I should be in this away team. I'm, implicitly saying, like, oh, I'm attractive enough to be there. And, some of their complaints ended up panning out. Like, we see Tasha Yar in the final away team. She ended up being let in. It's some of the revisions like really do clash with how Gene originally envisioned all of this, but it happens, I suppose.
It happens. It's just it really is a shame that Yar did end up in that party, because it's hard to suspend your disbelief.
It is, and you see. Well, it does add a little bit of realism, because in some of the scenes where Yar is interacting with the locals, you can see looks of visual discomfort on their face. And it makes sense.
Yeah.
If Tasha Yar would go down to that planet, then of course everybody would be a little put off.
Yeah, I guess in the end it did kind of give the planet a little more character.
It did.
But speaking of Frakes, though, he himself was more than a little upset about his character's role in this episode.
Yeah.
If you remember.
I can still smell it. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean, you remember the amount of work we had to put in for this one. So he spent a lot of his time on set pouting about how Riker just was not having enough sex on this show. And, I mean, this includes all the previous episodes. This one really laid it bare, because it's obviously an episode about sex.
Right.
And, what better time to do this with this character than now, right?
And it even sets it up at the beginning.
It does, yes, it does. Yeah, which is odd that they didn't really follow through with it. But I guess in some kind of retaliatory way or something, every morning he would just down 3 or 4 onion bagels.
This fucking onion
and then he'd spend his entire afternoon just propositioning the female extras. And I'm not really sure how successful he was with that, but the number of onion bagels that had to be bought for this man was unbelievable.
Every day. Jesus. So
it was insane.
Anyway, moving on. Now that we're past the Frakes issue, which is really what always comes to my mind when I think of this episode.
Yeah.
So they go down to this planet, and this is where we see our first glimpse of it. And I guess we should explain what we've alluded to it quite a lot, but what exactly society's like down there. Mm-hmm. It's our first true outdoor location shots. It's
a location shot. I mean, the first one since the pilot.
Was there outdoor shots on the pilot?
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, you don't remember? There were location shots for Riker meeting Dr. Crusher.
Yes, you're right. I do remember that. Yep. Okay. At Farpoint itself was
the at Farpoint itself.
Yeah. Okay. So since then, it was all just cooped up in the studio, but now we're finally back outside, and everything looks appropriately lush. I like the location that they used. And they got extras to match that. Is how I would describe it. If everything's fresh and nubile and the nature's all blonde, then certainly the extras match.
So So the code name around the studio during production was that this was the Aryan episode.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Not hard to see.
Everyone. as you can imagine, as you have probably seen if you're following us along our watch of the show, is everyone is white blondes, young, strong, clad in pure white.
Yeah.
So at the time, it was pretty difficult to separate what we were filming from that concept, just given how ridiculous it all was. And I know a few people asked Gene whether or not it was intentional.
Mm.
But Gene being Gene, his answers are always kind of a bit coy. I mean, I will say that during a production meeting one day, he did refer to the planet as quote paradise, which is, I guess, is the only clue we have to go on. So I'll leave the listeners to draw their own conclusions on that one.
Well,
but yeah, all blonde people.
Some of the things that we shot, I think, lent some more clues as to what was kind of going on. So there was a lot of explicit shots of the extras kind of like frolicking together or being affectionate with one another. None of the crew, just the extras, in this kind of fanciful location that was really nice. And it was always Gene taking over the direction for those scenes that we shot. And he had a philosophy for directing those scenes. He called it pornography for the soul. And
that's right.
Yeah, it involved mostly just the female extras doing something or other with each other. And a lot of it did not make it to the final cut. I think most of that footage just went home with Gene into his personal collection. But when we, everybody was kind of concerned about how much film we were using, how much time we were spending, because we only had so many hours of daylight to get these shots filmed. And if a lot of it was being spent on this, like, what were we even doing there? And
right,
a lot of us petitioned the director to talk to Gene because, Gene's not going to listen to you or me talking to him, right? And Gene was very, very unhappy to have this brought up to him, which makes me relieved that I didn't try to do it. But Gene insisted that if we're going to spend all this time and money securing this location, moving out here, that he's going to get his money's worth to clean up his language a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he kind of took the role of director upon himself.
Yeah.
For a lot of this episode, because according to him, the mood of the society on this planet was going to be very 60s, very free love kind of stuff. And so he wanted the extras to kind of always be, I guess, touching each other, grabbing each other, necking, according to him. And you'll remember that the extras were not so thrilled with this.
No, not at all.
Aside from maybe one or two of the male actors or extras, I guess you should call them, were on board, but pretty much all the women were just not having it. It was not really a fun set to be on. It was pretty rough. Gene would constantly interrupt cuts because people weren't, I guess, affectionate enough for him.
Yeah, it was very strict about it. Like, they had the physical direction had to meet his standard, and if they were at all like just kind of pussyfooting around it, Gene would stop the shot and correct them very aggressively.
Very aggressively, yeah. He really had a vision about this. It was a lot.
You remember the biggest way that his vision kind of faltered from the final product, right? Like, initially, the people on this planet were supposed to be like nudists, I suppose, or they just didn't have clothing. Not that it was, I guess nudism is more of a statement that people make, but these people just never made clothing because they didn't need it, and it was a foreign concept to them. And it'd be this whole thing when the Enterprise crew comes down, they see the uniforms, like, oh my god, what is with your skin? It's like, oh, that's not skin, it's clothes, right? Yeah, and it was a whole thing. But we had, at several times throughout the process, we always had to tell Gene that you can't just have nudity on television. Like, I have no idea how somebody with his amount of experience in television would just conveniently forget that you couldn't do this. And Gene would always counter with, like, oh, we'll have strategically placed plants around the sets that would cover everything up. It would be okay. Don't worry about it. But the logistics of blocking something like that for every single shot with the obscene amount of extras that he had hired, of course it wasn't going to work. Even once we got him to acquiesce to this, he just always was kind of pouty with the costumes that we had. It was really hard to get something that worked with his vision of what the show should be.
Right.
Yeah. It was difficult to please.
Yeah, and even then, I mean, not only with Gene, but the costumes were pretty divisive among the fans too. They were pretty revealing, which going from what we've been talking about so far, you might have thought that was like a Gene thing, but it's not.
Yeah, this one was for once it was not Gene.
It was actually just a pure coincidence. The costume designers really didn't have much to work with because we were under kind of a budget crunch by this point, and so all they really had for the costumes was just a spool of white fabric, and they had to make this work for like 20 extras at a time. The goal being just make them as simple as possible with as little fabric as possible, and they ended up being really revealing, and a lot of the actors probably shouldn't have been quite as revealed. The end result was, in a way, to Gene's liking, because if you'll remember, I mean, he wasn't so thrilled with the fact that the actors had to be clothed, but the lead actor, or the lead extra there, the main guy, right?
Yeah.
He had a little bit of a belly, right?
He
he
was not camera ready.
He wasn't camera ready, but you'll notice that his costume accentuates his stomach.
It kind of frames it in a way.
It absolutely frames it. That was actually a Gene idea. He found it hilarious. He would giggle at it every time he saw it. So, we were forced to dress him just in this ridiculous costume that framed his kind of pudgy stomach. And that's why, for the audience, you see this guy who is clearly not fit to be wearing a costume such as this, wearing such a costume.
Well, the problem with those costumes, yes, to some extent it was a window into something that most people would rather not see. But the design of them also just created a ton of problems on set. Because given the nature of them, that it's just like two pieces of fabric fastened together at a very small anchor point. Very often they would just become unattached from one another. The amount of wardrobe malfunctions we had on set was, I think that this episode outnumbers every other episode put together, because most of the time our costumes were pretty good, but every other shot it seemed like, oh, somebody's costume snapped in half, came undone, and get somebody in there to fasten it back together. We had to do this so many times that in several scenes you can see the light reflecting off of the staples that we used to staple those two pieces of fabric together. It was awful. And imagine how it feels to, that's your job. My job is to walk up to this, beer belly mid-30s actor and just staple his clothes together while he wears them. It was not a fun day.
it was really demeaning for pretty much everyone involved. We saw a lot that day that we did not want to see, and some things we did want to see. To be fair,
Yeah, I mean, there
we do
were
have to
some
thank Gene for
positives
that.
there.
Yeah, there were some positives, but enough about the costumes. I think we've kind of run that into the ground. Let's continue with where this episode goes, huh?
Oh, this episode goes somewhere.
Well, I mean, it doesn't really go anywhere, but it does try to go.
It does.
So they beam down to the planet, right?
Right. We're still here.
And we're still at the beginning of the episode, by the way. They beam down to the planet, and we're treated to a very awkward sequence of the two main extras kind of introducing themselves, the aliens introducing themselves to the Enterprise crew, and being very overtly sexual.
They're very overtly sexual, but at the same time very not. I don't know how to describe this. It's like everybody has an image of human sexuality, right? And yes, they're human beings, adult human beings dressed scantily and being in close physical contact, but at the same time, they don't act in a way that I think would turn on anybody. The dialogue.
No, there's a lot of hugging.
There's a lot of like hugging and just like being in close proximity without doing anything about it. Everybody's kind of stiff. Everybody's kind of plastic, I would say, is how they act.
Yeah.
It's strange. It's strange. It's not at all titillating.
You're reaching kind of an uncanny point with the way these people interact with each other. But the Enterprise crew doesn't seem to have any qualms about this because they're all very excited about it. I mean, even Worf is excited about it. Troy and Riker exchange meaningful looks when the woman hugs Riker.
Right, but then Troy gets hers when the man comes up and propositions her.
Right, that's right. And even Yar gets a little action with the guy, which is somewhat vomit inducing to the viewer, but
I mean, it is science fiction.
It is science fiction. Wesley is the odd one out here.
But well, in some respects because he's a minor, but yes.
Yeah. Well, so it wasn't really written this way. I mean, what teenage boy wouldn't jump at the chance to have an orgy with a few beautiful women, a few beautiful Aryan women?
It depends on whether or not this teenage boy is in a Japanese anime or not.
Well, yeah, that would also that may also dictate his reaction. But in this case, it's a little bit different because at this point we had Will, who was really just unable to divorce himself from his own character. He kind of just. I really don't understand what his mental process was, or if he had kind of just like a disability here. But he and Wesley were the same as far as he was concerned, and this only kept getting worse and worse and worse. Until you get to the point where you look at Will Wheaton today, and that's what he is.
Yeah, he's still doing Star Trek conventions and promos.
Yeah, he thinks he's Wesley.
Both names starting with a W certainly didn't help.
It was pretty confusing, I think, even for us. I can't remember the number of times I accidentally called Will Wesley.
Right. It's like, hey, Wes.
Or vice versa. Yeah. It was a little embarrassing, but whatever. But so in this scene, he's kind of propositioned for like a little action, right?
He's flirted with.
Yeah, but he immediately cuts that right off, right? Yeah. And like I said, this was not written in the script. Like, he was going to be all for it, but Will, being Will, he was very uncomfortable with being touched or being in any kind of intimate situation at all.
Right.
You know? So he immediately, every time we would try to shoot the scene, and there were several reshoots, he would immediately just kind of like shut down and default to, his own mental reaction, which again he could not really divorce from Wesley, his character, and just completely cut off any possible sex that could be happening here.
Right. And it only got worse when the other kids that he was supposed to meet are introduced.
Yeah.
The
whole
whole romance subplot there got cut.
It really took a lot of improv from everyone to get this into both an understandable state and also a state with which Will was comfortable.
Right.
Because in that scene, the girl says, I'd like to do something with you, and Will just completely goes off script and says something like, there's games I don't know yet, or something like that. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean.
At one point, they're talking about, he's trying to introduce baseball to them for some reason, and he's talking about sticks. It's like, do you guys got a stick? Or a bat or something? Yeah. It's like, none of that was in the script. When you see the extras, talking about like, oh yeah, I think so. That's their improv. That's why it sounds.
That's a genuine reaction.
Yeah,
that's a genuine because you never see them playing with the stick.
Right.
The next time you see them, they're running in a single file line, tossing the ball back and forth. Gene's quote, "playing ball."
It influenced the 2006 picture, The Room, I believe, when the football scenes in that film are very, very similar to what we see here.
They are reminiscent, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did take some inspiration from that.
Yeah. So,
but leading on from that, right? Wesley runs for the ball after one of the kids Fred from YouTube throws the ball for Wesley to catch it, and he lands in a glass covered garden.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even call it a greenhouse. It's tiny.
It's a designated no landing zone, which is the most important part to the plot. But before we get off of this, can we just talk about those kids, quote unquote kids, for a moment, and how one of them has like a hairier chest than Riker?
I didn't even notice that.
You didn't notice that? The guy looks like he's like 30.
And I did not notice that.
Oh my god. He was just like, he was short, which is why I guess they put him as one of the teenage extras. But man, he looks like I said, he's pushing his 30s. It's insane. But anyway, Wesley like crashes into this garden, and unbeknownst to him, that's a place you're not allowed to be. It's breaking the law to be in that area.
Yeah.
And because he broke the law, they're gonna kill him. And then that's the thrust of the episode from here on out.
Yeah.
Because this planet has, or the society, I suppose, their system of law is founded on very, very strict principles. You break the law, you die, and that's it. And it's a swift deterrent, and it works for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes about saving Wesley Crusher while respecting, quote unquote, the Prime Directive, which again is not really applicable here
because it's already broken.
Right.
And that's right, folks. It's a Wesley episode. Meanwhile, I guess what you could call the B plot is unfolding on the Enterprise in orbit, where Picard comes in contact with a god.
There's a floating space station
in the shape of a space station.
Yeah, and it exhibits like pretty, I guess, godlike powers. It sends over an energy vessel that penetrates the ship and communes with Picard before interfacing with Data and disabling Data for a bit.
Yeah, it just knocks him right out.
Yeah, it demonstrates the ability to be omnipresent, like whenever they're on the planet or on the Enterprise, it is able to hear them. It has the ability to attack the Enterprise. Like at one point, it starts rushing at the Enterprise to crash into it, which would surely destroy the Enterprise. So it's a decently threatening entity. Yeah, but that is a B plot. Well, I don't want to spoil things, but ultimately does not go to very many places.
No, not at all. Not at all. Basically, what happens is that it's really hard to be, despite the fact that the A plot and the B plot connect, it's really hard to naturally talk about them in a linear fashion because it's almost like they don't connect.
They don't. The only connection
from a narrative perspective.
Yeah, from a narrative perspective, in the logic of the show, the only connection is that the society that they're visiting views this entity as their god. They call it God. They pray to it. But the two plot threads do not intersect very much at all.
No. They really, they don't converge in any meaningful way. But so the god needs to, well, the god doesn't need to do anything. Picard needs to understand what the god wants, right? And so it needs to interface with Data for some reason.
Well, by interfacing with Data, it learns about everything about the Federation.
Oh, okay. That's right. And we're treated to a wonderful scene of Crusher once again examining Data,
just
despite being an android.
Yeah, as if he's human.
Yeah. So this one's a closely kept secret. So all the time in our scripts, we see Crusher examining Data, like she does in this episode. About half the time, one of the writers or someone on set, one of the actors or the crew would just remember that this really doesn't make sense because Data's an android. He's not organic, right? And then the other half of the time, it would just sneak right into the episode, like this episode.
Right.
I mean, I think leading up to this episode,
it happened once before.
Well, once on screen, but it had to have happened 3 or 4 times in script.
Right. And luckily, we
caught it. Yeah. But when it does happen, it's more than a little embarrassing. I think we get so much fan mail calling this out. We even read some of it too.
It's a reasonable complaint, I think, but it's at the same time, who cares? If Crusher,
I care. I kind of care.
If Crusher's gonna be wearing like silly NES Zapper helmets and bringing people back from the dead, sure, she can operate on Data.
Well, I mean, those two things don't really excuse the how illogical it is to operate on a robot.
No, it certainly doesn't. But what I mean is that everything Crusher's doing inside medical might as well just be voodoo magic for how much sense it makes.
Except when it's not allowed to be, like making a vaccine.
Yeah, exactly. If it could actually solve the problem of the episode, then she can't do it.
Mm-hmm. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, so she has to examine Data because this god basically knocks out Data after using him as a viewpoint to get all the information on Starfleet and Federation.
Yeah, and so meanwhile on the planet, I don't think we mentioned that Wesley is going to be executed for
we
falling
did
into the glass.
Did we? We did. I think.
I thought we just mentioned that was like a no-fly zone.
Oh, well, no. I mentioned. I think I did. Oh, I can't even remember 5 minutes ago. I think I mentioned the system of law on that planet. How it is, one strike only, and then you're dead.
Okay. Well, in any case, Wesley's going to be executed, and there's a lot of back and forth, right?
there's some back and forth. I don't know about a lot, but there is. There's a lot. I suppose it's just a bunch of talking, but like this is supposed to be the slower paced Prime Directive episode. Like that's what it's going for.
Yeah.
And that's a formula we see very often throughout the series run. And I like that this is kind of laying the groundwork for it. You could say that the episode with the vaccine was also trying to do something similar, but I think that this one, in that it wasn't solved by a silly death match, it does the concept a little better.
Yeah.
Because I think it's cool. I like the idea that, all right, we have all this advanced firepower and all this stuff, but we still need to have a logical way of debating this structure, this society's structure for their laws, and it turns out they can't really do that. It's that's what's most interesting to me about Star Trek is the interactions of all these things. Like Prime Directive episodes are generally some of my favorite episodes. It's because, and the reason they are is because they always involve the Federation's hands being tied in some way, where they're powerless in the face of something that they could crush if they wanted to, but they don't because they're principled.
Right.
And that is always a scenario that makes for an interesting science fiction story to me.
Yeah, I guess we need to leave the inherently the inherent violation of the Prime Directive as the episode start. Yes. You have to leave that on the table,
Certainly.
I guess, because you can't really judge this episode by any degree. Just taking that as a given because it is horrible.
And that's a large reason why I view this as more of an early exploration of the concept rather than a full iteration of doing it well, because they do just start off by throwing the Prime Directive out the window, and then they keep trying to bring it back, and it's like, no, you already violated it. Let it go.
But you're right. It is kind of inherently interesting, and I think this episode really does Picard justice as a character. It's very fun to watch him try to wrestle with this moral conundrum.
Yeah, and especially at this point when Picard is very anti-child, like him having explicit affection for Wesley himself, because Dr. Crusher is distraught, hysterical, and she's kind of going at Picard for not having the same emotional reaction that she is, and then Picard fires back like, no, of course I care about Wesley, like I'm feeling the exact same way, I'm just I'm the fucking captain, I can't just go around crying all the fucking time and
he's not a woman.
Yeah.
Right, so
he might be the furthest of the crew from a woman.
Yeah, probably.
So it's
this
cool.
all culminates in Picard confronting the sex people on their planet, right?
Yeah, he tries to make a speech that'll save the day.
Right, and he does make a speech that'll save the day. Not the first, but not the last, where Picard looks up to the sky and recites some moral platitude and gets away with it.
Well, here's the thing about the climax that we're talking about, is that the initial plan was to just take Wesley and run away, like beam out of there. And only when the gods stopped them from doing that did they have to like justify themselves morally.
Yeah, but why would a god really find anything Picard said enlightening in that scene?
Yeah, I don't know. They try to paint the gods as unknowable, and they are. We don't get very many details about them at all. So they might not be at such a high level where something immortal would say would be new to them. But
yeah, well, I mean, the gods are basically like, I think they touched upon it in the episode. They're just evolved mortals.
Yeah, it's like a group of them
Yeah.
inside. Yeah, because Data offers like some amount of insight into what they are, having communed with the ball of energy. But
Right.
yeah, I mean it's of course the whole resolution feels a little hokey in that anytime you're gonna plead with a yet unseen force off camera and they just acquiesce without a response, it's like, okay, I guess you did it, you know.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and the whole episode really relies on the audience's innate reaction of unfairness to this system of law,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, yeah, of course it's not fair to kill somebody on the first time that they break the law. Yeah, you tell them, Picard, and you're out of there. You did it. But if you take any kind of like relativistic view on the situation, then it really is just the Enterprise crew coming in, shitting on this developing society and leaving and absconding.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Yeah, it's like
It absolutely is, and
they broke the law.
Yeah,
There's
go
no
ahead.
restitution for that. Wesley doesn't learn anything in this episode. He doesn't have an arc. It's
No.
really just like, oh, look at these barbarians. We're better than they are. Our morals are better than they are. Bye.
Well, in a way, I kind of like that because Star Trek doesn't really go into that realm often. Usually, there is kind of like a relativistic moral viewpoint that you get with each episode.
That's what
In
the
this one,
Prime
it's just
Directive
kind of-
is it's entirely relativistic.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but it is nice to see Picard just make the decision, just screw it,
While that is it's nice in the sense that it doesn't happen before then or after this very often at all. But how many times have they had a discussion about like, oh, you're ready to let this amount of people die? And Picard's just like, yeah, it's the Prime Directive, buddy. Of course I'll do it. And
Right.
and then the one time it's Wesley, it's like, no, fuck.
Well,
that.
Wesley's special.
Wesley is special.
Wesley's special
Special little guy.
So even more egregious than all of this, though, is the resolution of the
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. What resolution?
episode. Where the alien space station disappears and Picard says, okay, and then they leave.
Well,
That's it.
That was part of a rewrite. A very hasty rewrite, I might add. This originally this was going to be part 1 of a 2-part episode.
Is that right?
Yeah, so part 1 would have played out mostly the same as it did here, whereas part 2 would have been about the Enterprise's interactions with this space station god thing. That was where we were going to learn about them and their motives and their society, and it was going to be like a really philosophically based, slower episode. A lot of talking, a lot of just science fiction exploration of a higher culture, where we've seen a lot of lower cultures explored by the Federation. This is going to be like a real higher one, not just one being, but the whole of that spaceship, that whole group. So it was going to be really cool. The idea for that ended up being vetoed by Gene, who thought it wasn't like action packed enough. And wouldn't you know it, the next episode after this ends up being about like a spaceship battle, a lot of action scenes, a lot of special effects. But because of that, the ending of this one had to be rewritten to close the door somewhat. But we did want it to be open ended in that if we ever wanted to come back to these this spaceship god like thing, we could, right? The two, them and the Enterprise, weren't compatible with one another. They could see each other again and be fine. Of course, it never ended up happening, but the door was open for it. But as it stands, it's an extremely unsatisfying conclusion for the episode.
No, it's terrible.
Because you're painted, the whole thing is framed as having two different, not antagonists, but other forces. You have the Enterprise, you have the Society, and you have the God. And
you have two different conflicts.
Yeah, two different conflicts. That's a good way of putting it. And once the conflict with the society is solved, the conflict with the god just disintegrates. It doesn't resolve at all.
Yeah, and really, it should have kind of been the other way around. They're layered in such a way that the god conflict is much more important than the conflict with the aliens.
Right.
So it makes no sense that the conflict with the aliens being resolved would make the god just fuck off, but he does.
And that's it.
And that's the end of the episode. That's it, boys. Pack it up.
What I like to think about is the next time a spacefaring society comes to this planet and they go down to the surface and all the people are like, oh my god, you space travelers, you come down here, break our laws, and then run away. It's like, get the fuck out of here. What the hell are you doing here?
I'm really interested to see just how the next Prime Directive episode goes. It's going to be really fun to compare the two here.
It's got to be better than this.
It's got to be. I mean, it will be. I'm sure. Hopefully. I'm not really sure.
Maybe the next Prime Directive episode is just like a really good one, like that one where Riker's in the alien hospital, and it just takes 3 seasons to do another one.
He does have sex, or he has propositioned for it.
Right, but if I remember correctly on that one, the actress we hired was not attractive enough to like be Frakes' equal, so he had the script.
No, Frakes did not like that. Yeah.
You know, we'll get to there when we get there.
Yeah. But until then, we've got a new segment.
A new segment?
A new segment.
Oh my god.
Computer, run program, Star Trek trivia. So this is one many people don't know. But Captain Picard actually has what's known as the most comfortable chair in the universe at his estate back in France on Earth. So it was given to him after the events of Star Trek Nemesis by a Klingon delegate. And the scene where this happened was left on the cutting room floor, but if you bought the original Laserdisc release, you would have been able to see it. So, fun fact about our captain.
See, I love things like that, where it's a real reward for the true fans who are, sifting through the Blu-rays, DVDs, Laserdisc releases of all this, deleted scenes, the old drafts of the scripts, novels and all that. There's so much rich trivia and lore that is kind of like, it's very similar to an archaeological dig to me. Like, it's all out there, you just got to go find it. And the more effort you put in as a fan, the more rewarded you will be.
Absolutely. It really just shows the depth of this franchise.
Super deep, extremely deep franchise.
And speaks to the intelligence of the audience, just how inquisitive you have to be a Star Trek fan.
All right. So, everybody, that will do it for this week's episode of the Readier Room. Join us next week when we talk about the next episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. And until then, everybody, stay ready.
The troublesome little man-child.
Consider that in the history of many worlds, there have always been disposable creatures.
Do you consider yourself superior to us?
Should have told him to mind his own damn business.
When I stroke the beard thusly, do I not appear more intellectual?
Computer! Freeze program.
It's not a promising beginning.